Under a bruised Atlanta sky, rain hammers the Regal Heights Hotel, as Isaiah Jackson, a wiry black man in shredded clothes, staggers through its gold-trimmed doors, sack clutched tight, shouting, "This place is mine!" Guests in tuxedos gasp, security snickers, and manager Victor Grayson shoves him into a puddle outside, laughing, "Crawl back to the gutter." Isaiah's fist uncurls, revealing a crumpled photo of the hotel's 1968 groundbreaking, his young face beside a white man's. They mocked him, but what legacy would that spark ignite? Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from today, and if you stand for truth over power, hit like and subscribe, because tomorrow's epic twist is one you can't miss. Isaiah Jackson limped through the sodden streets of Atlanta, rain soaking his tattered jacket, as the sting of bruised ribs pulsed with every step, a cruel reminder of Victor Grayson's shove just hours ago at the Regal Heights Hotel. 5 miles. From that gleaming fortress of wealth, he pushed through the warped door of a derelict bar called the Rusty Anchor, its neon sign flickering like a dying heartbeat over a cracked sidewalk littered with cigarette butts and shattered glass. The air inside reeked of stale beer and sweat, but to Isaiah it was a refuge, a place to breathe after the humiliation that still burned in his chest. He slumped onto a stool, the burlap sack he'd clutched through the storm thudding onto the sticky counter beside him, its weight more than just the few belongings inside. Talia Reed, the bartender, glanced up from wiping a chipped glass, her sharp brown eyes narrowing at the sight of him. She was 32, with a tight braid coiled down her back and a scar above her left eyebrow from a fight she'd never talk about, a woman who'd once dreamed of law school but now poured shots for drunks to pay rent. She didn't smile, didn't ask questions, just slid a chipped mug of water his way, her fingers lingering on the edge as she studied the fresh purple swelling around his jaw. Isaiah didn't touch the water. Instead, he reached into his sack, his gnarled hands trembling slightly from cold or rage or both, and pulled out that crumpled photo, the one he'd flashed in the hotel lobby before Victor's security had laughed him out. He smoothed it on the counter, the edges curling from years of being folded and unfolded, carried like a talisman through decades of loss. Talia leaned closer, squinting at the faded image under the bar's dim yellow light, a groundbreaking ceremony from 1968, shovels piercing dirt, a crowd of suits grinning for the camera. There in the center stood a younger Isaiah, barely 25, his face smooth and proud, shoulders squared in a cheap but clean jacket, shaking hands with a white man whose smug grin and slicked-back hair marked him as someone who owned the world. "That's Edward Grayson," Talia said, her voice low, recognition flickering like a spark in her gaze. "Victor's granddaddy, built half this city." Isaiah nodded, his throat tight as he tapped the photo with a calloused finger. "And I built that hotel with him, co-owned it. Regal Heights was mine too till he stole it." His words hung, heavy, a claim so wild it sounded like a fever dream, but his eyes burned with a fire that made Talia pause, her hand stilling on the rag she'd been using to scrub the counter. She'd heard plenty of sob stories in this dive, tales of lost jobs and broken lives, but this was different. This was a man gripping a truth so deep it had carved lines into his weathered face. "Stole it how?" she asked, leaning her elbows on the wood. The bar empty except for a slumped drunk snoring in the corner. Isaiah's voice dropped, rough as gravel, as he told her. Edward Grayson had been his partner, a slick-talking real estate baron who'd needed Isaiah's savings and grit to fund the hotel back when banks wouldn't touch a black man's dreams. They'd signed the papers together, shook hands for the cameras, but Edward's smile had hidden a knife. "He wanted it all," Isaiah said, his fist clenching the photo's edge. "Couldn't stand a black man owning what he did." Talia's jaw tightened, her own history of being passed over for promotions at a downtown firm flashing through her mind. But she pushed it aside, focusing on him. "You got proof?" she asked, practical even in the face of his fury. He patted. "The sack." "More than this. Papers. Somewhere. Been carrying 'em 30 years. She didn't hesitate. Grabbing her phone from under the counter, she snapped a picture of the photo, her thumbs flying as she uploaded it to X with a caption. "Regal Heights Hotel MGR Victor Grayson beats homeless man claiming ownership. This his proof?" She tagged Victor's public account. Her followers few but loyal, mostly locals who'd nursed grudges against the city's elite. "Let's see what they say," she muttered, hitting post. Isaiah watched, unsure what it meant, but the way her lips curved into a thin, defiant line gave him a flicker of something he hadn't felt in decades: hope. By midnight, the post had exploded, racking up 10,000 views, retweets spreading like wildfire through Atlanta's restless underbelly. Talia's phone buzzed non-stop, notifications lighting up the bar's gloom, comments ranging from "Victor's a pig" to "fake news, lock him up." Isaiah sat silent, staring at the screen as if it were a portal to a world he'd been shut out of, a world that might finally hear him. But that hope shattered at 2 a.m. when the bar's door crashed open, wood splintering under. The force of 3 hulking men in black hoodies, their faces shadowed, but their intent clear in the steel pipes and baseball bats they gripped. Victor Grayson stormed in behind them, his tailored suit pristine despite the hour, his pale blue eyes glinting with a rage that made the room feel 10 degrees colder. "You!" he spat, pointing at Isaiah, who stood slowly, sack in hand, ribs screaming as he straightened. "Think you can smear me with some old picture?" His voice was a venomous hiss, dripping with the entitlement of a man who'd never been told no. Talia stepped forward, phone raised to record, but Victor's hand shot out, slapping it to the floor where it skidded under a table, screen cracking. "You're nothing," he snarled at Isaiah, nodding to his thugs. "Teach him." The first pipe swung, catching Isaiah's shoulder with a sickening crunch that sent him stumbling into a stool, the metal clanging as it hit the floor. He grunted, pain exploding down his arm, but he didn't fall, not yet. The second blow landed on his back, a bat driving the air from his lungs, and he dropped to his knees, blood trickling from his lip as he bit it to keep from screaming. Talia lunged for her phone, but a thug grabbed her braid, yanking her back. So hard she crashed into the counter, bottles toppling in a cascade of glass and cheap liquor. Victor watched, arms crossed, a king overseeing punishment, his lips curling as the third thug kicked Isaiah's sack across the room, its contents spilling, a rusted knife, a few coins, and a folded stack of yellowed papers tied with string. "Pathetic," Victor laughed, stepping closer as Isaiah wheezed, clutching his side. "You're a ghost who should have stayed dead." The drunk in the corner stirred, mumbling, but a glare from Victor silenced him. Talia, sprawled amid the wreckage, clawed her way to her phone, blood from a cut on her forehead streaking her vision. She hit record just as the final blow came, a pipe slamming into Isaiah's skull, dropping him face first into the puddle of beer and blood pooling on the floor. He went still, breath shallow, eyes fluttering shut. Victor turned to leave, his thugs trailing, but Talia's voice rasped out, "Got you, bastard," as she uploaded the shaky footage, her hands trembling but her will iron. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving the bar a battlefield, Isaiah's crumpled form the centerpiece. She crawled to him, checking his pulse, faint but there, and as the video hit the internet, she whispered, "This ain't over." Outside, Victor climbed into a sleek black sedan, wiping his hands on a silk handkerchief, smirking as his phone lit up with the first wave of notifications. He thought he'd crushed it, ended it, but the spark Talia lit was already burning out of control, and Isaiah's fight was just beginning. Talia Reid's video of Victor Grayson's brutal beatdown of Isaiah Jackson hit 10,000 views by dawn, the grainy footage of pipes crashing into flesh spreading like a plague across Atlanta's digital veins. The rusty anchor's shattered remains buzzed in the early light as paramedics hauled Isaiah's limp body onto a stretcher, his swollen face barely recognizable, blood crusting around his split lip. Talia stood outside, her forehead stitched. From a free clinic's shaky hands, the sting of antiseptic sharp as she scrolled her phone, watching Najik's regal truth climb the trending list. Comments flooded in. "Victor's a monster. Justice now. This city's rotten." She clenched, her fist, the ache in her skull pulsing with every heartbeat, but a grim satisfaction curled her lips. Isaiah might be broken, but his voice was finally loud. By noon, Atlanta's black community had rallied, 200 strong, spilling into the street outside the Regal Heights Hotel, its glass facade towering 30 stories above them like a smug king overlooking peasants. Signs stabbed the air. "Isaiah owns this." Grayson Steel, voices roared, raw and unyielding, as traffic snarled for blocks. Isaiah, patched up and discharged, limped from the clinic 5 miles away, his ribs screaming with every step, the burlap sack slung over his good shoulder like a battle flag. He pushed through the crowd, their cheers washing over him, a tide of fury and hope he hadn't felt since 1968. Talia spotted him, her braid swinging as she shoved past bodies to reach him, her eyes blazing. "Tell him," she said, thrusting her phone into his hands, its cracked screen already recording. Isaiah faced the sea of faces, his voice hoarse but steady, cutting through the chants like a blade. "I built this hotel with Edward Grayson in 1968, he began, his words slow, deliberate, each one a brick in a wall he'd been stacking for decades. Signed the papers, put my savings in, broke the ground, but in 1970 he framed me for arson. Said a black man couldn't own what he did. Cops hauled me off, gave me 15 years, erased me from every record." The crowd hushed, then erupted, fists pumping, phones flashing as his story hit live streams. "That's my hotel," he finished, pointing at the gleaming tower, "and Victor's still stealing it." Talia uploaded it, her thumbs flying, and within minutes, the clip racked up thousands of views, the hashtag surging nationwide. Could a single voice topple a dynasty? Across town, Victor Grayson paced the hotel's penthouse office 30 floors up, his polished shoes clicking on marble as he watched the chaos unfold on a wall of security screens. His pale blue eyes narrowed, jaw tight, the tailored suit he'd worn to crush Isaiah now wrinkled from a sleepless night. His phone buzzed with alerts, board members texting panic. "Control this, Victor." "Stock's dipping." He slammed it down, glass cracking under his fist, and called a press conference. His voice smooth as oil when he stepped to the podium an hour later, cameras rolling. "Isaiah Jackson's a fraud," he said, his smile practiced cold as he held up doctored deeds, ink fresh but stamped with 1968 dates. "He squatted on our land, spun lies when we caught him. A con artist jailed for theft, nothing more." Reporters scribbled, some nodding, others frowning as he waved a police report yellowed and forged, claiming Isaiah torched a Grayson warehouse 55 years ago. "This ends now," Victor declared, tossing the papers onto the table like a king discarding trash. "Regal Heights is mine." The crowd outside roared louder, unconvinced, but Victor's words wormed into the feeds, splitting the narrative. Who'd believe a homeless man over a titan? By dusk, the protest swelled to 500, clogging Peachtree Street, horns blaring as commuters cursed. Talia stood beside Isaiah, her arm brushing his, both of them electric with the surge of support. "We're winning," she whispered, her breath fogging in the cooling air. But then the sirens screamed, a wall of blue uniforms surging from side streets, riot shields glinting under streetlights. Cops kettled the crowd, boxing them in, batons raised like executioners' tools. "Disperse!" an officer barked through, a megaphone, his voice a mechanical snarl. The front line pushed back, shouting Isaiah's name, but the police moved like a machine, tear gas canisters hissing as they arced into the throng. White clouds erupted, stinging eyes, choking lungs, screams piercing the haze. Isaiah coughed, doubling over, his bad shoulder slamming into pavement as a boot caught his side, the crack of bone audible even over the chaos. Talia yanked him up, her own eyes streaming, dragging him toward an alley as gas swirled around them. "Stay with me," she yelled, her voice raw, but the crowd scattered, trampled shoes and broken signs littering the street. Isaiah wheezed, clutching his sack, the photo inside crumpled but intact, his lifeline in the storm. They stumbled into the alley, collapsing against a dumpster, its rusted edge cold against their backs. Talia wiped her face, coughing, her phone buzzing with live footage of cops clubbing protesters, blood-streaking asphalt. "They're killing it," she rasped, despair clawing at her gut. Isaiah shook his head, pain etching lines deeper into his face. "Not yet," he croaked, defiance flickering through the haze. But as they caught their breath, a shadow loomed at the alley's mouth, a figure in a hoodie hefting a brick. Before Talia could react, it sailed through the air, smashing through the rusty anchor's last unbroken window 5 miles away, the crash echoing in her mind as she saw it later on a news feed. Painted on the brick in jagged white letters, "Next is you." She froze, the threat sinking in, her bar already a ruin, now a target. Isaiah gripped her arm, his eyes hard despite the gas still burning his throat. "They're scared," he said, voice low, a spark reigniting. "That's why they're hitting back." Talia nodded, swallowing fear, but the weight of those words pressed down. Victor wasn't just fighting, he was escalating, and the city was his weapon. What would he unleash next to bury them? As the night deepened, the protest's fire dimmed, under police boots. But the online storm grew, clips of Isaiah's speech clashing with Victor's lies, splitting Atlanta into believers and doubters. Talia pocketed her phone, her stitched forehead throbbing, and helped Isaiah stand, his weight heavy on her shoulder. They'd lit a match, but Victor held a blowtorch, and the war was only beginning. If you're raging at Victor's power grab, comment #1 down below to let us know you're with Isaiah's fight. Smash that like button if you're sick of systemic lies, and subscribe, because tomorrow's chapter digs deeper into this battle for justice. How far will Victor go to silence a truth that's already screaming? Stick around to find out. Isaiah Jackson slumped against the alley dumpster, his breath rattling through bruised ribs as the sting of tear gas lingered in his throat, the chaos of the crushed protest still echoing in his ears. Talia Reid crouched beside him, her stitched forehead pulsing with pain, the brick's threat, "Next is you," searing her mind like a brand. The night was thick with humidity, Atlanta's skyline glowing faintly beyond the alley's grime, the Regal Heights Hotel a distant taunt. 30 stories high. Isaiah shifted, wincing as he clutched his burlap sack, its weight a lifeline despite the beating he'd taken. "We need proof," he rasped, his voice rough but resolute, eyes glinting with a fire that refused to die. Talia nodded, her jaw tight, the memory of Victor Grayson's smug press conference twisting her gut. "They've got the story twisted," she said, standing, her boots scuffing the cracked pavement. "We've got to hit 'em with something they can't burn." Isaiah pulled himself up, leaning on her for support, his bad shoulder throbbing where a cop's boot had landed. 1968 ledger, he muttered, tapping the sack. "It's in there somewhere. My name Edwards, the deal. Hotel records'll have it." Talia's eyes narrowed, a plan sparking. "Then we're breaking in." By midnight they'd slipped through back streets, avoiding flashing sirens and roaming patrols, the city still simmering from the protest's collapse. The Regal Heights loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting moonlight like a predator's stare. Talia led Isaiah to a service entrance she'd scouted from bar gossip, a rusted door tucked behind overflowing trash bins 10 yards from the main lot. She jimmied the lock with a hairpin, her hands steady despite the ache in her skull, and they crept inside, the hum of industrial air conditioning masking their steps. The basement stretched before them, a labyrinth of concrete and shadows, lit by flickering fluorescents that buzzed like trapped flies. Stacks of boxes towered 15 feet high, labeled with dates and faded ink, a graveyard of the hotel's past. Isaiah pointed to a corner, his memory sharp despite decades on the streets. Old files over there, 1960 stuff. They moved fast, Talia tearing open cartons, dust coating her fingers as she rifled through yellowed papers. Guest logs, payrolls, nothing useful. Isaiah dug into a metal cabinet, its hinges squealing, his breath hitching as he pulled out a leather-bound ledger, its cover cracked but intact, stamped Regal Heights 1968. He flipped it open, pages brittle under his calloused hands, and there it was, halfway down a column in faded blue ink. Isaiah Jackson, co-owner, 50% stake, partnership with Edward Grayson, signed June 3, 1968. His chest tightened, a rush of vindication flooding through the pain. "This is it," he whispered, tracing the line with a trembling finger. Talia yanked out her phone, snapping photos, the flash cutting through the gloom, her heart pounding, with the weight of what they'd found. "We've got him," she said, voice low but fierce. "Victor's done." They thought they'd struck gold, a weapon to flip the lies, but the basement door slammed open, a silhouette filling the frame. 2 security guards in black uniforms stormed in, radios crackling, their bulk blocking the exit. "Hands up!" one barked. A burly man with a buzz cut and a baton already drawn, his name tag reading Hicks. The other, leaner with a scar across his cheek, leveled a flashlight in their faces, blinding them. Talia shoved her phone into her pocket. The photos unsent as Isaiah clutched the ledger, stepping back. "We're not stealing," he said, voice steady despite the odds. "This is mine." Hicks laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the walls. "Yours? A bum like you?" He lunged, grabbing Talia's arm, twisting it hard. She yelped, the snap of her wrist echoing, bone giving way under his grip, pain exploding up her arm like wildfire. She dropped to her knees, clutching it, tears stinging her eyes as Hicks ripped the ledger from Isaiah's hands. "Victor said you'd try something," the scarred guard sneered, tossing it into a nearby furnace, its door already open, flames licking 30 feet up the chute. The leather hit the fire, pages curling black, ink melting into ash as Isaiah roared, lunging forward. Hicks swung his baton, cracking it across Isaiah's jaw, sending him sprawling into a stack of boxes that toppled with a crash, paper fluttering like dead leaves. Talia scrambled up, her good hand clawing at Hicks. Nails, raking his face, but Scar grabbed her braid, slamming her into the concrete wall, her vision blurring as blood trickled from her nose. Isaiah rolled, snatching one charred page from the furnace's edge, the heat searing his fingers, his name still legible amid the ruin. He stuffed it into his sack. But Hicks kicked him in the ribs, a wet crunch signaling another break, air rushing out in a pained grunt. "Get 'em out," Scar barked, dragging Talia toward the service door as Hicks hauled Isaiah up by his collar, his limp body scraping the floor. They thought they'd escape with something, anything. But headlights flared outside, a police cruiser screeching to a halt 10 yards from the exit. 2 cops piled out, guns drawn, their badges glinting under the sodium lights. "Caught him. Breaking in," Hicks lied, shoving Isaiah into their grip, the charred page hidden in his sack unnoticed. "Assaulted us too." The older cop, a grey-haired man with a sneer, cuffed Isaiah's wrists tight, metal biting into skin already raw from the protest. "Always the same with you people," he muttered, slurring the last word with venom, shoving Isaiah into the cruiser's back seat, his head slamming against the frame. Talia kicked at Scar, her broken wrist useless, but he tossed her to the younger cop, a rookie with cold eyes who pinned her against the car. "She's with him," Scar said, wiping blood from his cheek where her nails had dug in. "Troublemakers." The cops didn't ask questions, didn't care, their radios already buzzing with Victor's voice. "Lock 'em up." Talia's phone stayed silent in her pocket, the photos trapped, unsent, as the cruiser peeled away, leaving the hotel's basement smoldering. Hours later, Victor stood in his penthouse office, 30 floors above the city, watching a news ticker. On his flat-screen TV, homeless man arrested for hotel break-in assault. He smirked, sipping bourbon from a crystal glass, his suit pristine despite the night's chaos. "He's a thief who attacked my staff," he told the anchor over. A live feed, his voice smooth, rehearsed, the forged deeds from his press conference flashing on screen again. "This ends any delusions he's got." The anchor nodded, swallowing the lie while Victor leaned back, the city's skyline sprawling below like a kingdom he still ruled. Talia slumped in a holding cell 10 miles away, her wrist swelling. Purple pounded the bars with her good hand, fury drowning the pain. "He's lying," she shouted, but the guard just laughed, a deep chuckle laced with contempt. "Tell it to the judge, sweetheart." Isaiah sat in a separate cell, blood crusting his jaw, the charred page tucked inside his torn shirt, his only lifeline now. Victor thought he'd crushed them, burned their proof to cinders, but Talia's mind raced, plotting. She'd quit the bar, ditch everything, fight this to the end. Her phone was gone, confiscated, but those photos were still in her cloud if she could get out. The cops hadn't found the page Isaiah hid, hadn't searched his sack yet. They thought they'd won, but Victor's smug grin was a mask, and Talia knew he'd rigged more than just this night. The basement raid had cost them, broken them, but it hadn't buried them. Not yet. Isaiah Jackson slumped against the cold steel bench of his cell, 10 miles from the Regal Heights Hotel, the dank air thick with mildew and the metallic tang of blood crusting his jaw. His ribs ached, a dull throb from the security guards, kicks in the basement, and his shoulder burned where the baton had landed, but his hands stayed steady, clutching the charred page he'd salvaged from the furnace, now hidden inside his torn shirt. The cell's bars loomed 8 feet high, rusted and unyielding, locking him in a concrete box no bigger than 10 by 10, a fluorescent bulb flickering overhead like a taunting eye. Every hour, a guard sauntered by, a beefy man with a buzz cut and a smirk, banging his baton against the bars, the clang echoing like a gunshot. "Stay in your place, boy," he'd snarl, his voice dripping with venom, then slam the stick into Isaiah's side through the gaps, a fresh bruise blooming purple with each hit. "Ain't nobody coming for you," the guard added, spitting, on the floor before stalking off, leaving Isaiah gasping, his breath shallow but his eyes hard, unbroken. 10 cells down, Talia Reid sat on her own bench, her broken wrist swollen to twice its size, a throbbing mass of purple and blue she cradled against her chest, the pain a constant scream she refused to voice. Her forehead stitches itched, the clinic's sloppy work pulling tight as she pounded the bars with her good hand, her knuckles raw from the effort. "He's lying," she shouted, her voice bouncing off the walls, but the guard just chuckled, a low, mocking sound that made her skin crawl. "Tell it to the judge, sweetheart," he said, twirling his keys before disappearing around the corner, leaving her alone with the hum of the jail's flickering lights and the weight of their failure. Victor Grayson had them caged, his forged deeds and smug TV lies painting them as thieves, but Talia's mind churned, plotting through the haze of exhaustion. Her phone was gone, seized by the cops, but those basement photos were still in her cloud if she could just get out. Isaiah had that page, their last shred of proof, and she'd burn this city down to free him. 3 days in, a new face appeared at her cell door. A wiry black man in his 40s with a shaved head and a faded scar running down his neck, his brown eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Talia Reid?" he asked, voice low, glancing over, his shoulder as the guard lingered 50 feet away. She stood, wary, her good hand curling into a fist. "Who's asking?" He slid a crumpled business card through the bars, Jamal Carter, journalist, printed in chipped ink. "Used to work for the Atlanta Chronicle till I got canned for digging into Grayson corruption. Saw your video. I'm in." Talia's pulse quickened, hope flickering through the pain. "You believe Isaiah?" she asked, stepping closer, her voice a whisper. Jamal nodded, his jaw tight. "Been chasing Victor's dirt for years. That photo's real. Let's break him out and blow this wide open." By day 5, Isaiah's beatings had worsened. Guards taking shifts, their fists slamming into his stomach, his back, his legs, each blow punctuated with slurs that cut deeper than the bruises. "You're nobody," one growled, a skinny man, with a goatee, smashing his knee into Isaiah's gut until he vomited bile onto the concrete, his body trembling, but his spirit clawing to hold on. Talia, released on a technicality after Jamal pulled strings with an old editor, didn't waste time. She met him at a dive diner 15 miles from the jail, its vinyl booths cracked and greasy, the air thick with fried onion stink. She slid, the charred page across the table, stolen from Isaiah's cell during a chaotic shift change she'd orchestrated with a fake delivery call. Jamal's eyes widened, scanning the singed ink. "Isaiah Jackson, co-owner, 50% stake." "This is gold," he said, voice trembling with adrenaline, pulling a recorder from his jacket. "I've got a pirate signal off-grid. We air this now." That night, Jamal's voice crackled over a rogue radio frequency, bouncing across Atlanta's airwaves, unreachable by Victor's lawyers. "Isaiah Jackson's no thief," he declared, reading the page's text, his tone fierce, unyielding. "Victor Grayson's empire's built on stolen black dreams. Here's the proof." He played Talia's jailhouse whispers, her account of the basement raid, the beating, the burned ledger, every word a Molotov tossed into the city's simmering rage. By morning, Atlanta erupted, 5,000 flooding the streets, fists raised outside the Regal Heights, windows shattering under hurled bricks, glass raining 20 feet to the pavement below. Chants of "Free Isaiah" shook the air, tires screeching as cars gridlocked downtown. Talia stood at the edge, her broken wrist in a sling, watching the chaos she'd ignited, her chest swelling with grim pride. Jamal's signal looped, unstoppable, and by noon, Victor's sleek black sedan rolled into a precinct lot, cops cuffing him for the basement assault. His tailored suit rumpled as cameras flashed. Isaiah's cell door clanked open hours later, a flustered guard muttering about a clerical error, and he staggered out, ribs screaming, into a crowd of hundreds cheering his name, their voices a thunder he hadn't heard since 1968. Talia pushed through, grabbing his arm, her eyes shining. "We did it," she said, voice cracking with relief. He nodded, tasting freedom, the charred page still tucked against his chest, their fight alive. But that night, as the city buzzed with triumph, a shadow slipped into Jamal's apartment 5 miles away, a figure in a black hoodie clutching a switchblade. Jamal sat at his desk, tweaking the next broadcast, when the door creaked open. He spun too late, the blade slashing across his throat, a wet gurgle escaping as blood sprayed the recorder, his body slumping onto the hardwood, eyes wide in shock. The figure pinned a note to his chest with the knife, paper soaking red. "Keep talking. They all die." By dawn, Talia found him, her scream tearing through the building as she dropped to her knees, the recorder slick with his blood still running, capturing his last breath. Victor's release hit the news an hour later, bail posted at $200,000, his grin smug on Live TV as he adjusted his tie. "A tragic accident by a desperate man," he said, shrugging off the cuffs, his voice silk over steel. "My family's name stands." Talia clutched the recorder, Jamal's, blood staining her hands, her broken wrist forgotten as fury drowned her grief. Isaiah stood beside her, his own bruises a map of their war, staring at the screen as Victor walked free. "He's not done," he said, voice low, a promise and a curse. Talia nodded, pressing play, Jamal's final words crackling through the static, a ghost rallying them forward. "If Victor's blood-soaked victory makes your stomach turn, comment #1 below to stand with Isaiah and Talia's fight. Hit that like button if you're done with rich liars walking free, and subscribe because tomorrow's chapter dives deeper into this brutal clash. What'll Victor unleash to bury them, now that their ally's gone?" Isaiah Jackson stood rigid in the cramped apartment, 5 miles from the Regal Heights Hotel, the air heavy with the coppery stench of Jamal Carter's blood still drying on the hardwood floor. His bruised ribs ached with every breath, a dull reminder of the jail cell he'd escaped, but his eyes stayed fixed on the body slumped over the desk, Jamal's throat a gaping red slash, the switchblade pinning that note, "Keep talking. They all die," to his chest like a grotesque trophy. Talia Reid knelt beside the corpse, her broken wrist trembling in its sling as she clutched Jamal's recorder, its plastic slick with his life, her good hand shaking as she pressed play. His voice crackled through the static, faint but fierce, his last words a defiant echo, "Victor Grayson's empire's built on stolen black dreams." She stopped it, her breath hitching, tears cutting tracks through the blood smeared on her cheeks. Isaiah's fists clenched, the charred page from the 1968 ledger still tucked inside his torn shirt, its singed edges a fragile lifeline in this spiraling war. "He's trying to break us," he said, voice low, gravelly, his jaw tight with the weight of decades fighting men like Victor. Talia stood, wiping her face with her sleeve, her stitched forehead throbbing as she met his gaze. "Then we hit." "Harder," she said, her tone steel despite the grief choking her throat. "Jamal died for this, we take it to the top." By noon, they'd cleaned the blood from their hands in a chipped sink, the apartment's walls peeling like old skin, and hatched a plan. The city council was meeting downtown, 15 miles away, a public session Victor couldn't rig from, his penthouse perch. Talia hacked a rideshare app with Jamal's old laptop, booking a beat-up sedan under a fake name, and they rolled into the heart of Atlanta, the skyline jagged against a grey sky spitting rain. Isaiah gripped his burlap sack, the recorder and charred page inside. his knuckles white as the car jolted over potholes, every bump jarring his broken body. Talia's eyes darted to the rear view, watching for tails, her broken wrist useless, but her mind razor-sharp. The council chamber loomed ahead, a squat brick building dwarfed by glass towers, its steps swarming with reporters and protesters still buzzing from the riots. They slipped through the crowd, Talia's sling-drawing glances, Isaiah's limping, gave a testament to their fight, and pushed into the packed room, 200 seats filled with suits and citizens, the air thick with murmurs and the stale scent of coffee. The council sat at a curved dais, 5 stern faces peering over glasses, the mayor at the center, a paunchy white man named Harold Tate whose campaign Victor had bankrolled. Talia shoved forward, elbowing past a security guard who flinched at her glare and grabbed the mic at the public podium, her voice cutting through the hum like a gunshot. "Victor Grayson killed Jamal Carter last night," she declared, holding up the recorder, its blood-streaked casing glinting under the fluorescent lights. "He's covering up decades of theft, starting with Isaiah Jackson's stake in the Regal Heights Hotel." Gasps rippled through the room, phones flashing as she played Jamal's final broadcast, his words ringing out, "Here's the proof." Isaiah stepped up, pulling the charred page from his sack, his hands steady despite the pain shooting through his ribs. "This is me, 1968, co-owner," he said, voice booming, raw with 30 years of buried truth. "Edward. Grayson framed me, stole it. Victor's keeping the lie alive with blood." The council stirred, Tate's face reddening as he banged his gavel, but the crowd roared, drowning him out, fists pounding seats, voices shouting, "Justice!" Talia thrust the page at a clerk who hesitated before taking it, her eyes wide. "Investigate this," she demanded, turning to the room. "I can't hide now," the mayor stammered, sweat beading on his brow, but the council caved under the noise, Tate muttering, "We'll look into it," his words lost as reporters swarmed, live feeds blasting the moment across Atlanta. By dusk, Victor's suspension hit the news, the council barring him from the hotel pending review, his face pale on TV as he exited his office, escorted by cops who didn't cuff him yet. So Isaiah walked free, the crowd outside the chamber swelling to 1,000, their cheers a thunderclap as he raised the sack like a flag, Talia beside him, her sling a badge of their war. "We got him," she said, voice cracking with triumph, her good hand gripping his arm. Night fell, the city electric with their victory, streetlights casting long shadows as they slipped into a cheap motel 15 miles out, its neon sign buzzing "Vacancy" in flickering red. Isaiah sank onto a lumpy mattress, his body screaming for rest, Talia pacing by the window, her mind still racing. "He's down," she said almost to herself, peering through the blinds at the empty lot. "Council's got no choice now." Isaiah nodded, exhaling slow, the weight of decades lifting just enough to breathe. But at 2 in the morning, the world exploded. A deafening blast ripped through the rusty anchor, 5 miles away, flames. Swallowing the bar Talia had called home, its splintered husk devoured by a fireball 30 feet high. She'd left her dog, a scrappy mutt named Jax, tied out back. His bark silenced as the inferno consumed him, the yelp cut short by collapsing. "Timber!" Talia bolted upright, the motel shaking from the distant shockwave, her scream tearing through the room as she grabbed her phone, news feeds already screaming, "Explosion rocks downtown bar." She stumbled to the TV, flipping it on, the screen flickering to life with a reporter's voice, "Police suspect arson." Then Victor's voice crackled through a hacked radio on the nightstand, a signal pirating the motel's cheap set, "I own this city." His laugh was ice, sharp and deliberate, a promise of more. Talia's knees buckled, her broken wrist slamming the wall as she sank. The loss of Jax a gut punch atop Jamal's death, her home now ash. Isaiah lunged to the window, peering into the dark, his heart hammering as a shadow moved 50 yards out, a glint of metal catching the streetlight. A sniper's bullet grazed his leg, slicing through denim and flesh, blood pooling on the carpet as he dropped, grunting, the shot silent but deadly. "They're here!" he yelled, dragging himself behind the bed, Talia crawling to him, her good hand yanking the blinds shut. The motel door rattled, a fist pounding, but no one entered, not yet. "He's not suspended," she rasped, realization dawning, her voice trembling with rage and fear. "He's hunting." Isaiah clutched his leg, blood seeping through his fingers, the charred page still against his chest, their victory a mirage. The radio hissed again, Victor's voice taunting. "You burned me, I'll bury you." Talia grabbed the recorder, its bloodied shell a relic of their fight, and smashed the radio silent, her breath ragged. They'd crashed the council, thought they'd won, but Victor's blowtorch was lit and the flames were closing in. Isaiah's eyes met hers, pain and defiance warring in his gaze. "We move," he said, forcing himself up, blood dripping. As he gripped the sack, Talia nodded, hauling him toward the bathroom window, their escape a desperate scramble as the sniper's scope hunted them through the night. Isaiah Jackson stumbled through the motel bathroom window, his leg bleeding from the sniper's graze, a hot trickle soaking his shredded pant leg as he dropped 5 feet into the gravel lot, 10 miles outside Atlanta. Talia Reid followed, her broken wrist screaming in its sling, her good hand hauling his burlap sack as glass shattered behind them, the sniper's second shot splintering the frame they'd just escaped. The night was pitch black, clouds choking the stars. The Regal Heights Hotel a distant threat 30 miles away, its shadow looming in their minds. Isaiah hit the ground hard, his bruised ribs flaring, blood pooling beneath him as he dragged himself toward a ditch, the sniper's scope glinting 50 yards back, a predator's eye in the dark. Talia slid beside him, her breath ragged, the explosion of the rusty anchor still burning in her chest. Jax's death a fresh wound atop Jamal's. "We can't stay here," she hissed, yanking him into the underbrush, thorns tearing at their skin as they crawled, the motel's flickering neon sign fading behind them. Sirens wailed in the distance, Victor Grayson's voice still echoing from that hacked radio. "You burned me, I'll bury you." They ran, limping through back roads for an hour, Isaiah's leg leaving a crimson trail, until they reached a condemned church 10 miles out, its steeple sagging like a broken spine, windows boarded with warped plywood. The door creaked open. Under Talia's shove, dust swirling in the stale air as they collapsed inside. The pews splintered, hymnals rotting in piles. Isaiah sank against a wall, his breath shallow, the charred page and recorder still in his sack, their fight hanging by a thread. Talia paced, her good hand flexing, her mind racing despite the pain. "He's got snipers now," she said, voice tight, peering through a crack in the boards at the empty road beyond. "We need help." Isaiah nodded, wincing as he shifted. His leg, blood crusting the gravel embedded in his shin. "Someone who can hit him where it hurts," he rasped, his eyes hard despite the exhaustion carving lines into his face. By dawn, a figure slipped through the church door, a wiry black woman in her 30s with a buzz cut and a laptop bag slung over her shoulder, her dark eyes scanning the gloom. "Talia," she called, voice low, cautious, her sneakers silent. On the cracked floor, Talia stepped forward, her sling a stark white against her torn jacket. "Nia Evans?" she asked, recognizing the name from Jamal's old contacts, a hacker he'd vouched for before Victor's blade silenced him. Nia nodded, dropping her bag, pulling out a battered laptop, its screen glowing blue as she powered it up. "Heard your story on Jamal's signal," she said, fingers flying over keys. "Been tracking Grayson's dirty money for years. I'm in." Isaiah dragged himself closer, his leg stiff, blood flaking off as he leaned on a pew. "Can you prove it?" he asked, voice rough but urgent, pulling the charred page from his sack. Nia glanced at it, then at him, a spark of respect in her gaze. "With this? Yeah. Victor's bribed half the city, judges, cops, council. I'll blow it open." For 3 days they holed up in the church, Nia hacking into Victor's financials through dark web tunnels, her screen a blur of transactions. 50,000. To a judge in 1970, 200,000 to a precinct last week, millions funneled through shell companies tied to the Regal Heights. Talia guarded the door, her good hand clutching a rusted pipe she'd found, her broken wrist a dull ache as she watched the road, every shadow a threat. Isaiah cleaned his leg with water from a leaking font, the wound festering but his will unyielding, the sack never leaving his side. On day 4, Nia cracked it, pulling up a ledger mirroring the burned one, digital proof of Victor's empire built on stolen black wealth, Isaiah's name scrubbed but traceable through buried codes. "Got him," she said, uploading it to a whistleblower site, the files hitting the net at noon, crashing Victor's stock by 20% in hours as Dr. Grayson fraud exploded online. By dusk, news vans swarmed the hotel 30 miles away, reporters shouting as cops hauled Victor in for questioning, his suit rumpled, his face pale, but his smirk intact, cameras flashing as he stepped into the precinct. Talia watched it on. Nia's laptop, the church's silence broken by her sharp laugh. "He's cornered," she said, turning to Isaiah, who stood, legs stiff but eyes blazing. "They'll fry him now," he said, tasting a victory he hadn't dared dream of since 1968. But at midnight, the screen flickered, Nia's laptop sparking as a virus chewed through her system, files frying in seconds, her scream piercing the quiet as she slammed the keys, smoke curling from the vents. "They hacked me back!" she yelled, panic cracking her voice, the whistleblower site crashing simultaneously, data vanishing into the void. Before they could react, the church doors burst open, a SWAT team storming in, 10 black-clad figures with rifles raised, red lasers dancing across the walls. "Down!" the leader barked, a hulking man with a buzz cut, his badge glinting under the flickering bulb. Isaiah dove behind a pew, his leg buckling, blood smearing the floor as a bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing through muscle an inch from bone, his grunt lost in the chaos. Talia swung her pipe, cracking a helmet, but a taser hit her chest, 50,000 volts dropping her twitching to the ground, her broken wrist slamming the concrete, a fresh snap echoing as she screamed. Nia kicked her laptop away, lunging for a window, but a rifle butt smashed her skull, blood spraying as she crumpled unconscious. Her buzz cut matted red. The team zip-tied them. Isaiah's arms wrenched back, shoulder bleeding freely. Talia's wrists bound despite the break. Nia dragged limp between two men. "Terrorism," the leader snarled, waving forged warrants, his voice thick with contempt. "You're done." They were shoved into a black van, tires screeching as it peeled out, leaving the church a silent ruin. The sack kicked into a corner, its contents spilling, the charred page, the recorder, a lifeline lost. Hours later, Victor walked free from the precinct, 30 miles away, his grin smug on live TV as he adjusted his tie, bail posted at $500,000, his lawyers spinning the hack as radical sabotage. "No one touches me," he said, voice silk over steel, the city's skyline glowing behind him, his empire intact. Isaiah woke in a black site, 20 miles underground, strapped to a chair, his shoulder oozing, leg festering, the room a concrete box lit by a single bulb swinging 10 feet above. A guard loomed, faceless in shadow, cracking knuckles as Victor's voice crackled through a speaker. "You're mine now." Talia and Nia were gone, split to other cells, their fight shattered. The digital win had flipped to a militarized trap, Victor's blowtorch roaring hotter than ever, and Isaiah's blood stained the floor, a testament to a war spiraling beyond control. If you're boiling at Victor's untouchable power, comment. Number 1 below to rally behind Isaiah's unbreakable spirit. Slam that like button if you're fed up with justice slipping through the cracks, and subscribe because tomorrow's chapter dives into their darkest hour yet. Can they claw out of this pit, or will Victor's fire consume them all? Stay tuned to see. Isaiah Jackson woke strapped to a metal chair in a black site, 20 miles beneath Atlanta's surface. The air cold and damp, reeking of rust and sweat, a single bulb swinging 10 feet overhead casting jagged shadows across the concrete walls. His shoulder oozed blood from the SWAT raid's graze, a raw pulsing wound an inch from bone, and his leg festered, the sniper's cut swollen purple, pus leaking through shredded denim. His wrists burned under tight zip ties, cutting into skin. Already bruised from 5 decades of fighting, his burlap sack gone, ripped away in the church ambush, its contents, the charred page, the recorder, lost to Victor Grayson's grasp. The room was a 10 by 10 box, no windows, no sound but the drip of water from a cracked pipe 30 feet above. each drop a slow hammer in the silence. A guard loomed in the corner, a faceless shadow in black fatigues, his knuckles cracking, like gunfire as he stepped closer, his boots thudding on the blood-smeared floor. "You're nobody," he growled, voice thick with contempt, slamming a fist into Isaiah's jaw, the crack of bone echoing as blood sprayed from his split lip, pooling in his lap. Isaiah's head snapped back, pain exploding through his skull, but he didn't cry out, his eyes locking onto the guard's, defiance burning through the haze. "Victor owns you now," the guard sneered, grabbing a hose from the wall, its nozzle dripping as he cranked it on, blasting Isaiah with ice-cold water at 50 pounds of pressure, the force slamming his chair back 3 feet, scraping metal on concrete. The torrent hit his face, flooding his nose, his mouth choking him as he thrashed, lungs screaming for air, the guard laughing. "Drown! Trash!" 5 minutes stretched into eternity, waterboarding him until his vision blurred, chest heaving, every gasp a battle against the flood. When it stopped, he coughed blood, shivering, soaked to the bone. But his spirit clawed on, unbroken, a ember glowing in the dark. 20 miles away, Talia Reid crashed a stolen van into a ditch. Her broken wrist splintered anew from the SWAT taser, the pain a white-hot spike as she kicked the door open, mud sucking at her boots. She'd been split from Isaiah and Nia in the raid, shoved into a separate transport. Her wrists bound despite the fracture, the zip ties slicing her flesh as she'd twisted free during a sharp turn. The driver distracted by a radio call. The van rolled 30 feet down an embankment, metal crumpling, glass shattering, and she crawled out, her good hand clutching a shard she'd used to cut the ties, blood dripping from her palm. Rain pelted her face, washing away the dirt as she staggered into the woods, 10 miles from the church, her breath ragged, the sting of Jamal's death and the bar's explosion fueling her steps. She had to find Nia, had to get Isaiah out. Victor's taunt, "You're mine now," ringing in her ears from that speaker. By dawn, she'd trekked 5 miles, collapsing in an abandoned gas station, its pumps rusted, windows smashed, the air thick with gasoline fumes. She broke into a storage room, finding a first aid kit, and wrapped her wrist in gauze, the bone grinding as she tightened it, a hiss escaping her lips. Then she heard a groan, faint, from behind a stack of tires 15 feet away. Nia Evans lay there, her buzz cut matted with blood, a gash on her temple from the rifle butt, her laptop bag clutched tight despite the blow that had knocked her out. Talia rushed over, shaking her awake, Nia's eyes fluttering open, dazed but fierce. "They took him," Nia rasped, voice weak, sitting up with Talia's help, her head pounding. "Black sight, deep." Talia's jaw tightened, fear warring with fury. "We're getting him out," she said, pulling Nia to her feet, her good hand steady despite the odds. Nia nodded, wincing, and unzipped her bag, revealing a burner phone she'd stashed, its screen cracked but alive. "Got a signal," she said, dialing a hacker friend, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Crash. The grid." Back in the black site, Isaiah endured 3 days of hell, guards rotating, their fists a rhythm of hate, each punch laced with slurs. Worthless. Animal. Stay down. They broke his nose, blood gushing onto his chest, and cracked 2 more ribs, each breath a knife in his side. But he carved a shiv from a spoon they'd left with rancid gruel, hiding it in his sock, his hands trembling but his mind plotting. So on day 4 the power flickered, the bulb dimming as Nia's friend hacked Atlanta's grid, blacking out precincts, traffic lights, and the black site's locks, a chaos Talia had begged for. Alarms blared, red lights flashing, guards shouting, as the facility plunged into darkness, their radios squawking with static. Isaiah seized the moment, slashing the shiv across a guard's throat as he fumbled in the dark, blood spraying warm across his face, the man gurgling as he fell. A wet thud on concrete. He cut his ties, staggering to his feet, shoulder bleeding, leg dragging, and bolted through the chaos, inmates screaming, doors clanking open as the riot erupted. He climbed a ventilation shaft 20 feet up, his broken body screaming, nails, clawing steel until he burst into a maintenance tunnel 50 miles from the city, collapsing in a ditch, mud caking his wounds, the sack gone but freedom roar in his lungs. Talia and Nia waited in a stolen pickup, 10 miles from the site. Nia's burner tracking the blackout spread, her head bandaged, Talia's wrist a throbbing mess. They spotted him, a shadow limping from the trees, and Talia ran to him, hauling him into the truck, his weight heavy on her good arm, blood soaking her jacket. "You're out," she said, voice cracking with relief. Nia gunning the engine as they peeled out, tires spinning mud 30 feet behind them. Isaiah wheezed, coughing blood, his eyes glinting with a wild hope. "He's finished," he rasped, thinking Victor's grip had slipped, the blackout a win. But as they hit a back road, a drone buzzed overhead, 50 feet up, its red eye locking on. Victor's voice crackling through a speaker. "Run all you want, I see you." The truck swerved, Nia cursing as she floored it, headlights cutting. The dark, but a spotlight blazed from above, pinning them. The drone's hum a death knell. Talia's heart sank, her good hand gripping Isaiah's, Nia's knuckles white on the wheel. They'd burned the sight, pulled him from hell. But Victor's blowtorch roared hotter, his reach a noose tightening around their necks, and the road ahead stretched into a nightmare they couldn't outrun. Isaiah Jackson slumped in the back seat of the stolen pickup, 50 miles from Atlanta, his shoulder bleeding through a makeshift bandage, the festering sniper wound on his leg, oozing pus as the truck jolted over rutted backroads. Victor Grayson's drone buzzing 50 feet overhead, like a vulture circling carrion. Talia Reed gripped his arm, her broken wrist throbbing in its sling, her good hand slick with his blood as she pressed it against the wound, the drone's spotlight slicing through, the cracked windshield, pinning them in a relentless glare. Nia Evans floored the gas, her buzz cut matted with dried blood from the black sight raid, her knuckles white on the wheel as she swerved around potholes, the engine roaring against the night's oppressive silence. Victor's voice crackled through, the drone's speaker cold and mocking. "Run all you want, I see you." The words chilled Isaiah's spine, his breath shallow, ribs cracked from days of torture. But his eyes burned with a fire that refused to die, the memory of his lost sack, charred page, recorder, fueling a rage deeper than pain. Talia yanked Nia's burner phone from the dash, its cracked screen flickering as she opened a drone app she'd seen Jamal use once, her fingers trembling but precise. "Got footage," she muttered, syncing it to the drone's feed, capturing Victor's taunt mid-air, the timestamp glowing. April 2nd, 2025, 2:37 a.m. "This'll bury him," she said, uploading it to a dark web stream, her voice a mix of desperation and defiance, the video hitting the net as they barreled toward the city. By dawn, Atlanta erupted, the drone clips spreading like wildfire, 10,000 views in an hour. In Grayson hunts trending as screams of outrage flooded the streets, protesters spilling from tenements and suburbs alike, their fury a tidal wave crashing against the Regal Heights Hotel 30 miles away. Talia patched Isaiah's leg with a torn shirt in a gas station lot, 15 miles out. The air thick with exhaust and the faint hum of distant sirens, Nia's laptop pinging with updates. Victor's stock plummeted 30%. His mansion, 50 miles north, torched by a mob. Flames licking 40 feet into the sky, glass shattering as bricks flew. "They're tearing him apart," Nia said, her voice hoarse, a grim smile cracking her bloodied face. Isaiah stood limping, his shoulder stiff but his will iron, the pain a dull roar he ignored. "Let's make it louder," he said, voice. Roar pointing to the hotel's silhouette on the horizon, a beacon of his stolen past. They ditched the truck, slipping into the city on foot, weaving through alleys clogged with trash and rage, the crowd swelling to 20,000 by noon, fists raised, voices shaking buildings as they chanted, "Isaiah's Hotel." Talia hacked, a news feed on Nia's burner, streaming live as they pushed toward the Regal Heights, the glass facade pocked with cracks from hurled stones, its gold trim dulled by smoke. Nia leaked the black site's coordinates online, tying Victor to the raid, the data hitting whistleblower sites as feds swarmed his office, 30 floors up, indicting him for murder, Jamal's pinned on his orders, the drone's taunt now. Evidence. Cops hauled him out, cuffs snapping on his wrists, his suit torn, face pale, but eyes glinting with a fury that promised more, cameras flashing as he sneered, "This is nothing." Isaiah limped to the hotel's steps, 15 feet. From the doors, the crowd parting like a sea, 5,000 strong behind him. Their roar a thunderclap as he raised a fist, shouting, "This is mine!" Edward Grayson stole it in 1970. Victor's bleeding it dry. His voice broke, raw with decades of buried truth. Phones filming as Talia shoved forward, her sling a badge of their war, Naya at her side, blood crusting her temple. "He's finished!" Talia yelled, her good hand waving the burner, the drone clip looping on screens nationwide. Victor's indictment live on every channel. The crowd surged, smashing windows 20 feet up, glass raining onto marble. A chaos. Victor couldn't silence. Then the tide turned. Hours later, Victor's lawyers flipping the script on a late-night broadcast 50 miles from the burning mansion, his voice calm, oily over the airwaves. Isaiah Jackson's a gang leader, orchestrated this violence. Forged photos flashed. Isaiah with thugs, guns, drugs. Lies spun from thin air, but the city split, some swallowing it, others raging harder. By midnight, a lynch mob stormed the hotel, 200 deep, white hoods glinting under streetlights. A noose swinging from a gloved hand, their shouts a guttural hymn of hate. "Hang him!" Isaiah stood his ground, 15 feet from the doors. Talia beside him. Nia filming, but the mob charged, boots pounding marble, a fist smashing Talia's jaw, dropping her to her knees, blood pooling as she gasped. They grabbed Isaiah, his shoulder tearing as they wrenched his arms, the noose tightening. Around his neck, rough hemp-biting skin. His breath cut to a wheeze as they dragged him out, the crowd scattering in panic. "Thief!" a hooded man bellowed, voice thick with venom, kicking Isaiah's festering leg, bone cracking under the blow, pain blinding him as they hauled him to a lamppost 50 yards away, the rope slung over steel, his feet dangling 3 feet off the ground. Talia staggered up, her good hand clawing at a hood, ripping it off, a pale face, eyes wild with rage. But a bat cracked her skull, knocking her out cold, her body crumpling to the pavement, Nia's scream lost in the mob's roar as they fled. Filming cut short. Isaiah swung, the noose choking, blood dripping from his lip, his vision fading to black, the hotel's lights a distant blur. Hours later, Talia woke in an alley 10 yards away, head pounding, blood matting her braid. Nia shaking her awake, burner gone, stolen in the chaos. She stumbled to the lamppost, heart stopping as she saw Isaiah's body swaying, limp, the rope. Taut, his face slack, eyes closed. "No," she whispered, collapsing, her broken wrist forgotten as grief clawed her gut. Victor's grin hit the TV, 50 miles away, free on a technicality, his voice silk. Justice served. He stood in, his penthouse bourbon in hand, the city's skyline his throne, the mob his weapon, Isaiah's fighter corpse on a pole. Talia clutched his legs, sobbing, Nia pulling her back, their war shattered, Victor's blowtorch a raging inferno that had burned their hope to ash. If you're gutted by Victor's twisted win, comment number 1 below to scream for Isaiah's. Justice. Pound that like button if you're raging at this racist nightmare, and subscribe because tomorrow's chapter flips this horror upside down. What secret could pull Isaiah from this grave, or is Victor's dynasty too deep to crack? Lock in to find out. Talia Reid knelt beneath the lamppost 50 yards from the Regal Heights Hotel, her knees grinding into the cracked pavement, her broken wrist throbbing in its sling as she clutched Isaiah Jackson's dangling legs, his body swaying limp from the lynch mob's noose, the rough hemp cutting deep into his neck. Blood dripped from his split lip, pooling on the asphalt 10 feet below, his shoulder wound a dark stain against his torn shirt, his festering leg twisted at an unnatural angle, bone splintered from the mob's kicks. Nia Evans stood beside her, her buzz cut matted with blood from the bat that had grazed her skull, her hands trembling as she pulled Talia back, her voice a broken whisper. "He's gone." The night was thick with the stench of gasoline and smoke. The hotel's shattered windows glinting 30 stories above. Atlanta's skyline a cruel witness to Victor Grayson's triumph. Talia's sob choked her throat, her good hand clawing at the rope, but it held fast. Isaiah's weight a dead anchor, his eyes closed, face slack, the life she'd fought for snuffed out. Then a shadow moved, swift and silent, 10 yards away, a figure in a tattered jacket slipping from the alley, a blade flashing in the streetlight's flicker. Before Talia could scream, the figure lunged, slicing the rope with a single cut. The hemp snapping as Isaiah's body dropped, thudding to the ground 3 feet below, a gasp escaping his lips, faint but alive. Talia froze, heart hammering. As the figure knelt, revealing a scarred black face under a hood, eyes sharp with recognition. "Malik Dunn," he said, voice low, rough, pulling Isaiah's arm over his shoulder. "Ex-cop. Faked my death when Victor framed me. He's not done yet." Nia stumbled forward, her breath hitching as she helped lift Isaiah. His pulse weak but beating, the nooses mark a raw red ring around his throat, his chest shuddering with shallow breaths. "How?" Talia rasped, her good hand steadying. "Him?" Blood soaking her sleeve as they dragged him into the alley. Away from the lampost's glare, the mob's echoes fading into the night. Malik's jaw tightened, his scar twitching. "Cut him down before it took. Been tracking you since the drone." They hauled Isaiah through back streets, 10 miles from the hotel, his weight dragging as his broken leg scraped asphalt, blood, trailing behind, until they reached a sewer grate 30 feet underground, its rusted bars groaning as Malik pried it open with a crowbar from his belt. They descended, the air dank and sour, water sloshing ankle-deep, the tunnel stretching 50 yards into darkness, rats scurrying along the walls. Isaiah slumped against the slime-slick concrete, his eyes fluttering open, pain etching lines deeper, into his weathered face. "Victor," he croaked, voice barely audible, his hand clutching at nothing, the sack gone, stolen by the mob. Talia knelt beside him, tearing her jacket to bind his leg, the festering wound a mess of pus and blood, her broken wrist useless, but her will iron. "We've got you," she said, voice cracking, Nia rigging a makeshift stretcher from pipes and burlap scraps found in the muck, her head wound throbbing but her hands steady. For 2 days they hid in the sewer, 30 feet below the city's pulse, Malik scavenging food from dumpsters 10 miles up, Talia tending Isaiah's wounds with stagnant water and stolen gauze, Nia hacking Victor's empire with a burner laptop Malik had stashed, her fingers flying despite the pain. Isaiah drifted in and out, fever spiking, his shoulder oozing but his spirit clawed back, fueled by decades of defiance. On day 3, Nia cracked Victor's bank, draining $10 million through encrypted transfers, routing it to offshore, accounts tied to whistleblower fronts, his stock crashing 40% overnight as Grayson broke trended, Atlanta's streets buzzing with glee, storefronts plastered with Isaiah Lives graffiti. Talia watched the feed, her good hand clenched, a grim smile breaking through her grief. "He's bleeding," she said, voice low, glancing at Isaiah, who stirred, his eyes glinting with a flicker of triumph. Malik rigged a radio from scavenged parts, tuning into Victor's live plea 50 miles away, his voice trembling on air. "I'm the victim here, targeted by radicals. Help me rebuild." His suit hung loose, his face pale, begging for mercy as cameras rolled, the city's elite turning away, his empire crumbling. Isaiah sat up, wincing, his broken leg braced. Against the wall, his voice a rasp. "He's down." Talia nodded, tasting victory. Nia's hack a blade in Victor's gut, their sewer hideout a fortress of revenge. But at dusk, the tunnel shook, a deafening blast echoing 50 yards down, sewage surging as a bomb ripped through the pipes, gas, flooding the air thick and choking. Victor's voice crackling through Malik's radio. "They're dead." The explosion came from above, 30 feet of concrete collapsing, water roaring in a torrent 20 feet high, sweeping Isaiah off his stretcher, his shoulder slamming steel, blood mixing with filth as he flailed, lungs burning with gas. Talia dove after him, her good hand snagging his shirt, her broken wrist grinding as she pulled, the flood dragging them 50 yards through the dark, Nia clinging to a pipe, her scream lost in the rush. Malik vanished, crushed under a slab of debris 10 tons heavy, his crowbar clattering into the muck, his scarred face buried in the chaos, a silent sacrifice. Talia hauled Isaiah to a ledge, coughing sewage, her lungs raw, his body limp but breathing. The gas stinging her eyes as she dragged him clear, 30 feet from the blast's epicenter. Nia crawled after, soaked and shaking, her laptop gone, swept away, but she clutched a USB from her pocket, a backup of Victor's confessions, her head wound, bleeding anew as she gasped, "Got this." They thought Malik's death was the cost. Victor's bomb the final blow, but as they staggered to a manhole 50 miles from the hotel, sirens wailed above, Victor's men swarming the streets, framing them for the blast, a news ticker blaring, "Terrorists bomb city infrastructure." Isaiah wheezed, blood dripping from his lip, his shoulder a mess, leg useless, but his eyes met Talia's, a spark of fight left. "He's not done," he said, voice faint, clutching her arm as Nia pushed the manhole open, the city's chaos spilling down. Talia nodded, her good hand gripping the USB, Malik's blood on her conscience, Victor's blowtorch a raging inferno that had flipped their win into a grave, and the war roared on, hotter than ever. Isaiah Jackson crawled from the sewer manhole 50 miles from Atlanta, his shoulder a throbbing mess of blood and torn muscle, the festering sniper wound on his leg leaking pus through a soaked bandage as he collapsed onto the cracked pavement, the city's chaos roaring above. Talia Reid hauled him up, her broken wrist grinding in its sling, her good hand slick with sewage and his blood, the USB of Victor Grayson's confessions clutched tight as sirens wailed, red and blue lights, flashing 10 blocks away. Nia Evans staggered out behind them, her buzz cut matted with filth, her head wound bleeding anew from the sewer bomb's chaos, her breath ragged as she gripped Talia's arm, the loss of Malik Dunn a fresh scar on her soul. The air stank of gasoline and smoke, the Regal Heights Hotel 30 miles distant, its shattered silhouette a taunt in their minds, Victor's voice from the drone still echoing, "Run all you want, I see you." Isaiah's chest heaved, ribs cracked from torture, his neck raw from the lynch mob's noose, but his eyes burned with a defiance that outlasted decades of pain. "We end this," he rasped, voice faint but iron, pushing to his knees as Talia steadied him, her own fury a match to his. Nia nodded, wiping blood from her temple, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Gala's tonight, he'll be there." The Regal Heights was hosting its annual gala, 500 elites packed into its grand ballroom 30 miles away, a glittering facade of wealth Victor used to prop up his crumbling empire, even as his stock bled and his mansion's ashes cooled 50 miles north. They'd drained his banks, sparked riots, but he'd flipped it all, framing them for the sewer blast, his lawyers spinning lies that clung like oil. Talia led them to a safe house 20 miles out, a crumbling shack tucked in a pine grove, its roof sagging, walls peeling, the air thick with damp rot. She patched Isaiah's leg with a stolen med kit, the wound a festering pit she doused with alcohol, his grunt of pain swallowed as she wrapped it tight, her broken wrist useless, but her will unyielding. Nia rigged a signal jammer from scavenged parts, her head pounding, blocking Victor's drones as Talia planned their strike, her good hand tracing a map of the hotel's layout on a cracked table, every vent, every exit memorized from bar gossip, years back. "We hit the gala," she said, voice low, fierce. "Show 'em the USB live in front of everyone." Isaiah nodded, standing, his leg stiff, shoulder oozing, but his presence a tower despite the ruin of his body. "He'll choke on it," he said, his breath shallow, the fight all he had left. By dusk, they'd slipped into Atlanta, 30 miles of backroads cloaked in twilight, Nia hot-wiring a rusted sedan that coughed smoke as they rolled toward the hotel, its glass facade aglow with chandeliers, limos lining the drive 15 yards from the entrance. They ditched the car 10 blocks out, limping through alleys, Isaiah's leg dragging, Talia's sling a stark white against her filth-stained jacket, Nia's blood-crusted temple a badge of their war. The gala buzzed, 500 elites in tuxedos, and gowns sipping champagne 30 floors up, the ballroom's marble floor gleaming, crystal dripping from ceilings 20 feet high, oblivious to the storm brewing below. Talia swiped a staff keycard from a dumpster, her good hand steady as she hacked the service entrance lock, 15 feet from the main doors, the click of freedom a whisper in the night. They rode a freight elevator 30 floors, Isaiah leaning on the wall, blood seeping through his bandage, Nia's jammer humming in her pocket, Talia's pulse hammering as the doors slid open to chaos they'd ignite. The ballroom thrummed. 500 voices a dull roar, the USB in Talia's hand a ticking bomb as she stormed the stage. shoving past a string quartet, her sling flapping, grabbing the mic from a stunned MC. "Victor Grayson's a murderer!" she shouted, voice slicing through the chatter. Heads turning, glasses clinking as silence fell. 500 pairs of eyes locking on her. Naya streaming it live on a burner phone she'd rigged, the feed hitting 10,000 views in seconds. "This USB proves it. Jamal Carter, the sewer bomb, all his orders." Isaiah limped forward, his leg buckling but his voice booming, raw with 30 years of buried truth. "He stole this hotel from me in 1970, framed me, killed to keep it." The crowd gasped, phones flashing, elites clutching pearls. As Nia played the USB through hacked speakers, Victor's voice crackling, "Run all you want, I see you," followed by bank logs, murder plots, a confession that shook the room. Feds swarmed in, 10 agents crashing through the doors 15 yards away, cuffs snapping on Victor mid-speech as he stepped to the podium, his tuxedo pristine, his arm raised to calm the chaos, his face pale but eyes wild, raging as he shouted, "Lies!" The crowd roared, 500 voices a thunderclap, "Isaiah! Isaiah!" As he stood, broken but unbowed, claiming the hotel live, his fist raised, blood dripping onto marble, Talia grinned, her good hand pumping the air. Naya's stream hitting 50,000 views, Victor dragged out, his cuffs glinting, his scream lost in the din. This isn't over. They thought they'd won, the ballroom theirs, justice a heartbeat away. But then gunfire erupted, Victor's private militia storming in, 20 men in black tactical gear, rifles blazing 15 yards from the stage, bullets shattering chandeliers 20 feet above, glass raining like knives. Isaiah dove, a shot tearing through his chest, blood blooming across his shirt as he hit the floor. Marble slick with his life, his gasp a wet choke as Talia screamed, lunging for him, her good hand pressing the wound, her broken wrist grinding, as she dragged him behind a table. Nia fired back with a pistol Malik had stashed, her head wound pulsing, clipping a gunman's arm 10 feet away. But the militia advanced, 500 guests scattering, screaming, bodies piling at exits 15 yards out. "He's hit!" Talia yelled, her voice raw, Isaiah's eyes fluttering, blood pooling 5 feet wide, his breath fading as Nia covered them, bullets pinging steel. Victor slipped his cuffs in the chaos, a bribed Fed turning away, his grin feral as he bolted. For a chopper on the roof 30 floors up, blades whirring as he climbed aboard 50 feet above, shouting, "I'll burn this city before I lose." The chopper lifted, wind whipping the gala's wreckage, Talia cradling Isaiah, his chest a ruin, her good hand red with his life, Nia's pistol clicking empty as the militia closed in, 10 yards now, their rifles trained. "Stay with me," Talia begged, her voice breaking. Nia's eyes wide with panic, the USB still blaring Victor's voice through the speakers, a hollow victory as Isaiah's blood stained the marble, his fight slipping away, the chopper's roar, a taunt fading into the night. Isaiah Jackson lay bleeding on the Regal Heights Hotel's grand ballroom floor, 30 floors above Atlanta, his chest a gaping wound where the militia's bullet had torn through, blood pooling 5 feet wide across the polished marble, his breath a wet rasp as Talia Reid pressed her good hand against it, her broken wrist grinding in its sling, useless and throbbing. Nia Evans crouched beside them, her buzz cut matted with blood from her temple wound, her pistol clicking empty as Victor Grayson's private militia closed in 10 yards away, their rifles trained, black tactical gear glinting under the shattered chandeliers 20 feet above, glass shards scattered like teeth across the room. 500 gala guests had fled, their screams echoing 15 yards from the exits, bodies slumped in doorways where bullets had cut them down, the air thick with gunpowder and panic. Victor's chopper roared 50 feet above, its blades, slicing the night as he'd escaped, his voice a fading snarl. "I'll burn this city before I lose." Talia's eyes burned with tears and fury, her good hand slick with Isaiah's blood, his pulse fading under her palm as she whispered, "Stay with me," her voice cracking, raw with desperation. Nia yanked a tablecloth, knotting it around. Isaiah's chest, her hands shaking but precise, the fabric soaking red in seconds as she muttered, "We've got to move." The militia advanced, boots crunching glass, 5 yards now, their leader barking, "Finish 'em!" Isaiah's eyes fluttered, his leg festering from the sniper's graze, shoulder oozing from the black sight. But he gripped Talia's arm, his voice a faint rasp. "Get me out." Talia hauled him up, her broken wrist screaming as she dragged him 15 yards to a service stairwell, Nia covering with a chair she swung, cracking a gunman's jaw 10 feet back, buying seconds as bullets pinged steel. They stumbled down 30 flights, Isaiah's blood streaking the steps, his weight crushing Talia's good arm. Nia's head wound pulsing as she shoved open a basement door, the hotel's guts a maze of pipes and shadows 50 feet below the Gala's chaos. They hid in a storage room 10 yards from the exit. Isaiah slumped against a crate, his chest heaving, blood bubbling with every breath. Talia tearing her sling to pack the wound, her hands trembling as she whispered, "You're not dying here." Nia scouted the basement, finding a radio crackling with Coast Guard chatter. Her voice low as she said, "He's on a yacht, 50 miles out." Victor's escape burned in their minds, his chopper landing on a vessel off Georgia's coast, his empire crumbling, but his will a blowtorch raging on. Talia's jaw tightened, her good hand clutching the USB of his confessions. The Gala's live stream still looping online, 50,000 views and climbing, a lifeline they'd cling to. "We hit him there," she said, voice steel, pulling Isaiah up, his leg dragging as they limped to a service van 15 yards out, Nia hot-wiring it with a knife from the crate, the engine coughing to life as they peeled out, 30 miles from the coast, the hotel's sirens fading behind them. The drive was a blur, 50 miles of dark highways, Isaiah fading in the back, his blood soaking the seats, Talia's good hand steering, her broken wrist a dull roar she ignored, Nia's head wound bleeding through a rag as she tracked Victor's yacht on a stolen GPS, its blip glowing 50 miles offshore. They hit the docks at midnight, a ramshackle pier 10 miles from Savannah, the air salty and cold, waves crashing 20 feet below as they spotted the yacht, a sleek white beast anchored 50 miles out, its lights glinting like a predator's eyes. Talia parked the van, hauling Isaiah to the edge, his chest a ruin, his breath shallow but his eyes sharp, locking on the vessel. "Blade," he croaked, nodding to Malik's old badge pinned to her jacket, a hidden knife she'd kept since the sewer. Nia rigged a rowboat from the pier, 10 feet long, its wood warped but afloat, and they piled in, Isaiah slumped against the bow, Talia rowing with her good arm, her broken wrist grinding as waves slapped the hull, Nia steering with a cracked oar, her head wound pulsing with every stroke. 50 miles out, the yacht loomed, 30 feet high, its deck silent but alive with shadows, Victor's men pacing, rifles slung. Talia tied off at the stern, 15 feet below the rail, Nia boosting her up, her good hand clawing steel, Isaiah's badge knife between her teeth as she climbed, her broken wrist a fire she ignored. She slipped aboard 10 yards from the hold, spotting Nia tied below, her screams muffled by a gag, blood streaking her face as a guard loomed, rifle raised. Talia lunged, blade flashing, slashing the guard's throat 10 feet from Nia, blood spraying warm across her arm as he fell, a wet thud on the deck. She cut Nia free, her voice a hiss. "Where's he?" Nia pointed up 30 feet to the bridge, Victor's silhouette pacing, his suit pristine despite the chaos, a gun in hand. Isaiah staggered aboard, his leg useless, chest bleeding through. The tablecloth. Talia hauling him 15 yards to a cargo hatch, his weight crushing her good arm as they slipped inside, the hold dank and oil-slick, 50 feet below the bridge. Nia planted the USB in a radio console, syncing it to a live stream, her hands shaking as Victor's voice blared, "I'd kill every one of you to keep this." The confession looping online, 10,000 views spiking to 100,000. In minutes as Coast Guard choppers buzzed 50 miles out, alerted by the feed. Isaiah gripped Talia's arm, his voice a rasp. "Get me up there." They climbed 30 feet, stairs slick with blood, Talia's good hand dragging him, Nia covering with a wrench she'd snatched. Her head wound a dull ache as they burst onto the bridge, 15 yards from Victor. He spun, gun raised, his grin feral, eyes wild with rage. "You don't quit," he snarled, firing, the bullet grazing Talia's arm 5 feet from Isaiah, blood trickling as she dove, blade slashing his leg 10 feet deep, his scream piercing the night as he stumbled. Gun clattering 15 yards away. Nia tackled him, wrench cracking his skull, blood spraying as he fell, 30 feet from the helm. But he triggered a remote, a beep echoing as the yacht shuddered, explosives igniting below, flames soaring 40 feet high, the deck buckling 50 feet wide. Talia grabbed Isaiah, diving overboard 15 yards from the blast, Nia leaping after, the inferno licking 30 feet above as they hit icy water, 50 miles from shore, waves crashing 20 feet high. The yacht erupted, debris raining 50. Yards out, Victor's scream lost in the roar as flames swallowed him, his body a shadow in the fire. Gun raised in a final futile lunge before the sea claimed him, 30 feet down. Talia swam, her good arm hauling Isaiah, his chest bleeding, leg limp. Nia kicking beside her, their lungs burning as they washed ashore 50 miles south, a rocky beach 10 miles from Savannah, burned and broken, the USB gone but its stream. Alive, 150,000 views sealing Victor's end. Talia collapsed, her broken wrist a ruin, Isaiah's breath faint, Nia's head wound pulsing, the Coast Guard's lights glinting 50 miles out. Too late to see Victor's last stand, his blowtorch extinguished in the deep. Isaiah Jackson lay sprawled on a rocky beach 10 miles south of Savannah, 50 miles from the Regal Heights Hotel's smoldering chaos, his chest a bloody ruin where the militia's bullet had torn through, the makeshift tablecloth bandage soaked, crimson, peeling away as waves lapped at his broken body. His festering leg oozed pus through shredded denim, the sniper's graze a swollen mess, and his shoulder leaked blood from the black sight's graze, every breath a wet rasp rattling through cracked ribs earned in decades of defiance. Talia Reid collapsed beside him, her broken wrist a throbbing knot of splintered bone in its tattered sling, her good hand caked with his blood and sea muck, her jacket shredded from the yacht's fiery plunge 50 miles offshore. Nia Evans slumped nearby, her buzz cut matted with blood and salt, her head wound pulsing from the bat and bomb, her breath shallow as she clutched her knees, the USB of Victor Grayson's confessions lost to the deep, but its live stream still. Echoing online, 150,000 views sealing his watery grave. The night sky glowed orange, the yacht's explosion a fading scar 50 miles out, its flames 40 feet high. Now just smoke on the horizon. Victor's final scream swallowed. By the sea 30 feet down, his gun raised in a last futile lunge, Isaiah's eyes fluttered, his pulse faint under Talia's trembling fingers, the cold sand grinding into his wounds as she whispered, "You made it." Her voice cracking with exhaustion and relief, her good hand brushing his brow, slick with sweat and blood. Nia staggered up, scanning the beach, her head pounding as Coast Guard choppers buzzed 50 miles north, their lights too distant to reach them yet, the war's end a fragile breath they clung to. Dawn broke, pale light filtering through pines 10 yards inland, and medics swarmed, alerted by the stream, hauling Isaiah onto a stretcher, his chest heaving as they pumped fluids into his arm, Talia limping beside, her broken wrist ignored, Nia trailing with a blanket draped over her shoulders, her blood-crusted temple a badge of survival. 3 months later, the Regal Heights Hotel's grand ballroom stood transformed, 30 floors above Atlanta, 500 guests packed in for its reopening, not as Victor's monument, but Isaiah's triumph, his scarred frame upright at a podium, a tailored suit hugging his wiry build, no longer a costume but a reflection of his restored legacy. His leg leaned on a cane, the sniper's wound a jagged scar beneath crisp fabric, his shoulder stiff but healing, his chest a map of stitches under the shirt, each breath of victory over the bullet that nearly took him. Talia stood in the front row, her wrist in a cast, her braid neat for once, now the hotel's community outreach director, her eyes shining with pride as she watched him, the war's toll etched into her face, but her spirit unbowed. Nia sat beside, her buzz cut grown out an inch, her head wound a faint line. Now a tech consultant tracing Victor's old networks, her hands steady despite the nightmares of bombs and blood. The ballroom's walls gleamed, the ostentatious Grayson portraits replaced with black and white photos of 1968, Isaiah young and proud at the groundbreaking, Edward's grin a lie beside him, newspaper clippings of the fight, protests, riots, the yacht, framing a truth once buried. "Today's not just about reopening this hotel under its rightful ownership," Isaiah began, his deep voice steady, carrying effortlessly across the room, 500 faces leaning in, city officials, activists, survivors of Grayson greed, their silence a testament to his words. "It's about acknowledging a history erased, starting the work to mend it." His cane tapped the podium, a quiet rhythm grounding him, his eyes sweeping the crowd, 73 years of struggle shining through. The courtroom had moved fast. Victor's death a spark that lit the Fed's fuse, uncovering decades of corruption beyond Isaiah's claim. Bribes, murders, stolen black wealth piled into the Grayson empire, now ash and forfeit. The original 1968 deed, found in a safe house raid 50 miles north, paired with the yacht stream and testimonies from Talia, Nia, and old staff sealed it, the court awarding Isaiah the hotel and millions in damages for 30 years of prison. And theft, a reckoning swift and sharp. "The journey from that rainy night I walked back into this lobby to today's been remarkable," he continued, his voice thickening as he gestured to Talia and Nia. "But I didn't walk it alone." The crowd stirred, 500 hands, clapping, a standing ovation swelling as he stepped back, his cane steady, the weight of decades lifting just enough to stand tall, the scars a map of a war won. The ballroom buzzed, blueprints on easels unveiling a new regal heights, a museum of black entrepreneurship 30 floors up, a community center 15 floors down, offering legal aid and business classes, a foundation to rebuild lives shattered by wrongful convictions like his, each brick a defiance of Victor's blowtorch legacy. "The Graysons saw this as their throne," he said, his gaze hard, sweeping the room. "I see it as a platform to lift others, tell silenced stories, create what they denied us." 500 voices cheered, activists nodding, elderly black, residents who'd lost businesses to Grayson's schemes wiping tears, their faith in Isaiah, a quiet fire rekindled after 50 years. Talia smiled, her caste a badge of their fight, the museum her brainchild, a space to honor Jamal, Malik, and the bar she'd lost. Her MBA funded by Isaiah's insistence now a tool to reshape the hotel's soul. Nia's tech traced more Grayson. Victims, her work sparking probes 50 miles out, her survival a testament to their grit. Victor's body never surfaced, presumed drowned 50 miles offshore, his empire a ghost, the yacht's wreckage a tomb 30 feet deep, his final lunge. A memory the stream immortalized. Isaiah thought it was over. Justice a hard-won dawn until dusk fell. The gala winding down, 500 guests thinning to 50, their voices a hum as he stood alone in the lobby, 30 floors below, gazing at the new sign. African motifs, woven into modern steel, a fusion of past and present glowing 15 feet above the doors. Talia joined him, her cast clinking against the reception desk, her good hand brushing his arm, a quiet moment after months of war. Then a shadow shifted, 10 yards from the entrance, a courier slipping a package under the glass doors, its edges, soaked as if pulled from the sea 50 miles away, a faint saltwater tang hitting the air as Isaiah limped over, his cane tapping marble, curiosity warring with dread. He tore it open, Talia at his side, her breath catching as a soaked photo spilled out. 1968, him and Edward at the groundbreaking, Victor's handwriting scrawled across it in black ink. "Family never dies." The words sank, like lead, his chest tightening, the bullet scar pulsing as a figure stepped into the lobby's glow 15 yards away. A young man in his 20s, pale blue eyes glinting like Victor's, silver-streaked dark hair a mirror of Edward's. His suit crisp, his smirk a blade. "Isaiah Jackson," he said, voice silk over steel, stepping closer, 10 yards now, his boots silent on marble. "Name's Ethan Grayson, Victor's son. This isn't over." Talia froze, her good hand curling into a fist, Nia rushing from the ballroom 30 floors up, her steps echoing as she hit the stairs, sensing the shift. Isaiah gripped his cane, its base hiding a blade he'd forged after the yacht, a glint of steel flashing as he straightened. 73 years of fight. Surging back, his voice low, a growl. "Bring it!" Ethan's smirk widened. 5 yards away, his hand in his pocket, a shadow of Victor's blowtorch reigniting. The war's end a lie. A new Grayson rising from the ashes 50 miles deep. Isaiah's scars burned. Talia's cast cracked as she tensed. Naya's footsteps thundered 15 floors down. The lobby a battlefield reborn, justice a fleeting dawn swallowed by a storm that never died. The story of Isaiah Jackson's relentless fight to reclaim the Regal Heights Hotel offers profound lessons rooted in resilience, justice, and the enduring cost of systemic racism. First, it teaches us that truth, though buried under decades of lies, can resurface with unwavering determination. Isaiah's 50-year battle against the Grayson dynasty shows that persistence can topple even the most entrenched power, but not without sacrifice. Jamal's life, Malik's death, and the scars etched into every survivor. Second, it reveals the insidious depth of racial injustice, where wealth and influence twist systems to silence the marginalized, as seen in Victor's brutal retaliations and the mob's noose. Yet collective action, like the protests and streams, can amplify the voiceless. Third, it underscores the fragility of victory. Isaiah's triumph at the gala was swiftly met with gunfire, proving justice is a marathon, not a sprint, and vigilance is its price. Finally, the shocking rise of Ethan Grayson hammers home that racism's roots run deep, a generational beast that demands constant resistance. This tale isn't just about a hotel, it's a mirror to society, reflecting the pain of stolen legacies and the power of fighting back. What will you take from Isaiah's war? How do you stand against the blowtorches? In your world, drop number 1 in the comments if you're inspired to push for justice. Hit like if this saga lit a fire in you, and subscribe to catch every twist of these epic battles. Share it to spread the fight. Thanks for riding this wild journey with us. May you find strength to face your own shadows and reclaim what's yours.